Good morning, friends. This is Carol Jeunnette, interim pastor at Lord of Life Lutheran Church in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I hope you're still doing well and managing things. Here in Wisconsin, we are now at the end of 4 weeks of Safer at Home. It started back on March 25th. Now, for those who are in essential services, so still working outside of the home, my guess is that in some ways that's really good. But it's probably always accompanied by some fear that your exposure to the virus is greater, and therefore the risk of getting COVID-19 or carrying it back to someone you love is a bit higher. For those of you who are out there, thank you for helping to keep this place up and running. And for those in healthcare especially, thank you for your commitment to the health and well-being of all people, even at the risk to yourselves. Now, for those of us who are not in essential services, and maybe envying those who are, for those of us who are staying at home, there's probably a little less fear of catching or spreading the virus, except for when we run out for groceries into the hardware store. But there is still a great risk of going crazy. And going crazy, I think, can come in several ways. It can come from having too much going on in the house, as in children who have to be taught and cared for and entertained and pulled out of sibling scraps and so much more. Or another way we can go crazy is from having too much togetherness, as in, please, can I talk face-to-face to someone else today? Another way that we can go crazy is from having too little going on, plain, flat-out boredom. The boredom piece really got to us in our house yesterday. There were a couple significant big symptoms. The first was when John and I realized that we were very intently watching the trash truck navigate our cul-de-sac, which is a tricky business. We were inordinately fascinated with whether or not the driver was going to get the truck in the right position for those big pincer arms to pick up our trash can. The driver did very well, and I'm grateful those services continue, but really? There we were, both standing in the front window, watching with bated breath. Can he do it without having to back up and come at it again? Ouch. The second symptom was in the evening. The television was on. I had napped through the midsection of the latest British detective show we're trying out. When I woke up and I asked John who done it, he couldn't answer because he was reading a book on his phone. So that was the beginning. It got worse. Not a tragedy, but still kind of telling. Our evening tradition is that John has his bowl of ice cream and I have my glass of wine while we're sitting and watching something on the television. Not a great tradition, but last evening we were both too bored to even bother with the television or with the ice cream or with the wine. And because there wasn't anything else to do, we went up and went to bed at about 9. Ouch again. Now, I'll come back to this in a second, but I want first to think about the gospel lesson from last Sunday. Yesterday, I talked about one aspect of it. I talked about Thomas and how Jesus drew the dubious disciple to himself, doubts and all. Today, I want to look at another part of that story, the part about peace. When the risen Christ appeared in that locked room, full of disciples who were afraid, who didn't know what was coming next, and didn't know what to do, Jesus breathed on them and said, "Peace be with you." Peace. The Greek word is eirene, but more important is the connection to the Hebrew word shalom. Now, when our kids were growing up and were at each other, I would yell out, "Peace, stop it." At that point, all I was looking for was for them to be quiet. But quiet does not get at what shalom is about. When I think about the way groups and countries scrap at each other in really serious ways, I hope and I pray for peace. Stop it. But again, shalom is more than just a cessation of hostility. In the Hebrew tradition, shalom has to do with wholeness and harmony and well-being. It's a very broad concept about universal flourishing. You could say that shalom, very simply, is God's understanding of the way things ought to be. Now, when the disciples were hiding behind locked doors, things were not what they ought to be. And Jesus appeared and said, "Peace." Now, they didn't go running out the door at that point, celebrating that everything was great, but my guess is that Jesus' gift of peace helped them remember what it was that Jesus was about and to settle down a bit. My guess is that it helped them look at each other and realize, yep, we're in this. We're in it, and it's tough. But God is here, and there's a bigger picture here, and it's okay. We'll figure it out. For us right now, things are not what they ought to be. Well, or maybe they are. I have to think about that. Maybe I change that. Things right now, as we are stuck at home, for many of us, probably are what they ought to be. Even if it does mean we're stuck in the house with kids going wild, or finding that watching the trash truck is a highlight of our day. Because this is about a bigger picture, the well-being and the flourishing of the whole, of God's whole. It's about shalom. And we are being called to be part of that shalom and to help that shalom come about. I'm going to take a deep breath, relax my shoulders, and breathe again. It's okay. It's difficult, but it's okay. We'll get through this. Feel Jesus' breath and hear his words. Peace be with you. And this evening, maybe John and I will leave the television off and find a puzzle or a game to accompany my glass of wine and his bowl of ice cream. Peace be with you, my friends. Peace.